Okay, we might get the ball rolling. So, look, a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us to celebrate the launch of Kathleen Donnellon's Deep Governance Matters, the World of Community Service and Mission. Tonight, Garrett Publishing is excited and proud to bring Kathleen's extensive experience and knowledge to a broader audience with the launch of this unique and much needed book. We are recording this evening's events, and we will provide a link to the recording for all who registered and indeed to the wider community from next week. My name's Karen Taylor. I've been privileged to be the Publishing Director at Garrett since 2018. For those of you wondering where our regular Zoom host CEO David Hewen is, he sends his regards with apologies that he is unable to attend this evening's event. So sorry to his groupies. I know there are a few. I wish to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I join you tonight from their land this evening here in Naarm, now known as Melbourne. We've allowed a little time later in the evening for a Q&A. Please place your questions in the chat facility on Zoom and keep your questions or comments respectful. Other participants can see your questions, or you may choose to direct them to the panelists directly and remain anonymous to your fellow participants. I'm joined in facilitating tonight's session by James McEwen, who I am assured can help us with the technology side and the Q&A. Many thanks in advance for this, James. We couldn't do this without you. Now, I'd like to introduce our fabulous speakers, tonight's stars. Kathleen Donnellon is a lawyer, mediator, and facilitator. For the past 15 years, she has been a board director and board chair of various faith-based not-for-profit organisations with a focus on international and local aid programs and education. Kathleen has worked in private legal practice as well as in community-based law and has completed the Australian Institute of Company Directors course. She has also taught at the University of Melbourne's Law School, where she lectured in mediation and dispute resolution. Michael McGurr has had over 30 years' experience in bringing together faith, culture, and community. Michael is the Mission Director at Caritas Australia and has published extensively in the areas of philosophy, literature, spirituality, and ethics. He has worked in the area of formation with the boards and staff of many schools and organisations, and is the author of Doorways into Hope and Joy and This Cup We Bless by Garrett Publishing. Michael, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen, and welcome everybody. A special welcome to Kathleen. And we're here tonight to celebrate something truly wonderful, which is this book. And if ever a book were needed, this is the one. And if ever there were the right person to write it, it's Kathleen Donnellon. It's a book about looking after something that we all love and we are often a bit nervous about taking responsibility for. That is our not-for-profits, our communities, our works, our clubs, our schools, all these things that need boards of management. And we've been used to a certain structure, and now it's over to us. And if we want these communities to thrive, we have to step up. It's just before I talk a little bit about the book, I just want to thank Kath and Tony for many years of wonderful friendship. They've been terrific friends to Jenny and I and our family, and to thank Karen and Garrett too for all the wonderful things that they've done, and their voice in the Christian community is really an important one. I'm going to start by sharing something with you now. It's this. See this? Craft singles. I got this at a singles bar. That's where you buy them. And I'm going to take one of these singles out. I'm old enough to remember when a single was a sort of a song you bought on vinyl. And inside, you find this little square, And this little square is in plastic. Look. Now, the beauty of this, they call this cheese, but actually it's very difficult to tell the plastic from the cheese, as a matter of fact. They look, feel, and taste quite similar. And I'm going to do something extremely daring, which my doctor would not recommend. Down the hatch. Now, why would I do such a risky thing? Well, we live in a world where we're very conscious of risk, of management, of compliance. All these things are really important. All the statutory obligations of boards are really important. All the issues of compliance and so on. Yeah, they are. The safety issues, the child protection. I'm not going to diminish any of that for a minute. But if that's all you have, your ministry is a bit like this processed cheese when you've got nothing but the process. A bit flat, colorless, tasteless. At the other extreme, I was hearing recently about a cheese called Poulet cheese, which is made in Serbia. Now, this is the second most expensive cheese in the world. And it is made from the milk of, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog in the background, but I'm not quite sure what to do. Anyway, Poulet cheese is made from the milk of a certain type of donkey, which is actually an endangered subspecies. So not many of these donkeys. And to make the Poulet cheese, the donkeys have to be taken to one of a very small number of caves because the atmosphere of the cave mixes with the milk to create a certain texture, smell, blah, blah, blah. And it's been done the same way for centuries with no change. But endangered donkeys, remote caves, it works out at about $1,300 a kilogram, which is not cheese to be putting on your lunch, right? Now, that's the cheese you have when you've got nothing but tradition. When you live in a world where you don't really matter in an organization unless you've been there for 25 years. You know, and I love the sisters and the brothers and the priests, but they had 2 years full-time in their novitiate. They had years of formation. They went and studied maybe overseas to live in communities. They've really had that. Can we replicate that? Not really, no. What we need to find is somewhere between something which is all process and something, and on the other hand, all tradition, or perhaps too much tradition, somewhere in the middle. That's where this book comes in. Deep Governance Matters. It's about the process of running something in the context of mission, a deep understanding and appreciation of mission. It's something like, I think, you know, if you want a special cheese, King Island Brie, right? $65 a kilo. It's special, but it's not $1,300 a kilo. That's what Kathleen is presenting us. Something bit process, something bit tradition comes together. Fantastic. Just what we need. And lots of great examples. I was in the Jesuit order for 21 years, for which I am daily grateful. I won't comment on the perspective of other members of my family. However, I am very grateful. And when I was in the order, many stories, as you can imagine, and many of these stories had to do with governance. In the order, the governance revolved around the idea of obedience, really. And there were many conventions and understandings. One was, once somebody had a job, you didn't interfere. You let them do it. That was called the office of another. And there's a great story about Brother O'Brien. Brother O'Brien taught in a big school in Sydney. He was Irish. He'd come from a farming family, and he was wily, you know. And one time the head of the school, whose name was Frank, called him in and said, Brother Michael O'Brien, I want you to take over the sports. at the school. No, Father, I don't think that's a good idea at all. No, he said, no. Brother, I really think you're the one for this. It's going to be good challenge for you. No, I can tell you straight, Father, it's not going to work. Well, and then in the order, they had this very solemn form of words. They said, I command you by virtue of holy obedience under pain of sin. That means it's serious. You've got to do it. And Frank said, well, so Brother O'Brien was made the sports master at the school, and then, which meant no one could interfere. And the next day, he put up a sign on the sports board that said, all sport cancelled until further notice. Now, this is an extremely poor model of governance, would you say, Kathleen? And I think that all our wonderful ministries in the church actually have some experiences of horrendous government revolved around egos, people contesting. And I'm not saying it's as bad as the show Succession. If anybody's seen the show Succession, Logan Roy, the father in Succession, Kathleen, he needs this book, right? He needs this book. You should mail it to him because he's a complete loose cat. Like, it's just everything's about it wrong. Okay, Kathleen, I'm not going to read bits of this book. You deal with beautiful issues, really important ones about mission. You get people to ask themselves, what's in it for me? You get people to lean in, to have confidence. You ask people to tell themselves, if they've been asked to join a board, somebody sees something in you that you might not see yourself. That, you know, believe it or not, it's more than just making up the numbers. And Kathleen, such good advice, such as being wary of, you know, inflated language when boards tell themselves that the ministry is exceptional or inspirational, and you say, well, is it? Where's the proof? Anyway, Kathleen, I'm going to hand over to you because I've overstayed my welcome at the crease, as Geoffrey Boycott used to say. Or he didn't say, others said of him. My favourite story of Geoffrey Boycott is he reached 100 at tea, and he was so slow that his teammates locked him in the toilet and declared that he'd retired hurt. Anyway, so somebody else could have a go. Kathleen, thank you for this superb book, which I have very great pleasure in declaring it launched and advising people to get their hands on it, because you will be very much the richer for the experience. So, Kathleen.
Well, goodness me, Michael. Thank you so much for those very kind words indeed. It may surprise you to know, it may surprise others to know that there are a number of people who said to me when I told them that Michael would be speaking tonight, gosh, you're very brave. So yes, I am, and also very honoured and proud that he was here to do so. So thank you, Michael. So in October of 2016, I was in Goroka in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and I was there in my role as a director. There was a conference of workers of our organisation, which was an aid organisation, and there were workers from all over PNG, as well as some workers who'd come across from Timor-Leste. And while I was there, they asked me to run a risk management seminar with these workers. And so in the, you know, as one does in these things, the butcher's paper went out and they were at tables, and I asked them, the different groups, to write down in some sort of priority what they saw as the major risks affecting their organisation. So they did that, and eventually the papers came back and they were taped up at the front of the room. And the risks that were on the paper were things like being attacked by rascals, the risk of civil unrest during election time, and holes in the road, which of course for them were not just little potholes, but huge holes that could devour whole vehicles. And there was one group from Kayunga, which is really remote. It's on the West Papuan border. And the only way at that time that you could really get in and out of Kayunga was by plane or by boat. I think that there might be a road there now, or perhaps under construction, but still the way that people get around is by boat, and our workers would deliver the services to settlements and so forth from these small boats. And so one of the workers from the Sydney office suggested that perhaps it would be a good idea if we put life jackets on the boat in case any of our workers went overboard. And this was put to the people from Kayunga, and they looked a little bit askance at that, and said that really, if they did happen to go overboard, it wasn't drowning that they were worried about, but the crocodiles that the waters were infested with. And I tell that story because that, of course, is a story about risk management. And as Michael has already indicated, risk management, compliance, policies, procedures, they're the kind of things that people normally think about when they hear the word governance. And all of those things are really important. They're really important for our organisations to be on top of, because that is what keeps our organisations transparent and accountable. But in my time as a director, it has seemed to me that sometimes there are other parts of governance that don't always get the same attention as those parts. And two in particular that I focus on are, as again Michael has indicated, mission. And our mission, of course, is about why we do what we do. Why we do what we do. What is our end goal? What is it actually that they're wanting to achieve? And sometimes it's easy for organisations to actually lose sight of that a little bit. And that sounds a bit odd, but you might be surprised about how often that you can sit with boards, groups of board members, and say, okay, so tell me what it is that this board is actually here to do. And you're kind of met with blank faces, because even though, of course, those people, understand really what the organisation is about, it's not crystal clear for them. They're not able to come up with a coherent answer quickly between the group. And I think that is a marker that we need to have processes in place to ensure that that mission, the why we do what we do and what are we doing it for, that is on the table all the time and embedded throughout the organisation, absolutely. And there are lots of reasons, obviously, that matters, but one of the reasons that I think it really does matter for the board is that we can get really stuck on the how. How do we go about doing what it is that we're doing? And we can get really sidetracked by the how. And that's understandable, because people are busy. People are busy with the business of actually running the business. And so we can become very sort of task oriented. But for a board, I think one of the ways in which it matters so much is that I actually think that having, I say disagreement, but, robust discussion on boards, and having people who have different ways of coming at the same issue, I think different views and aspects of those kinds of things are really healthy for a board, because I think it's that kind of difference that actually propels a board or an organisation forward. And in fact, if we have board members who are completely in lockstep all the time, then it's you can be a bit inclined toward complacency. But I also believe that that disagreement has to be around the how. How do we get to that end mark? How do we go about achieving that? There shouldn't be that disagreement about the why. This is what we're here to do. This is why. This is where this all comes from for us and for this board and for this organisation. So that was one thing, and the other thing that there are a few, but the other thing that particularly stood out to me is that governance is about systems and procedures, but governance is also about people. And I think that really is often lost. Good governance is relational. If we have the best systems and processes in the world, but we have people who can't communicate well with each other and within their own organisation, and who can't communicate well with other organisations, then we are going to end up in trouble. And it's certainly not true that anytime there's a bit of an issue between organisations, picking up the phone will just sort it out. But quite often it does, instead of just having continual emails going back and forward or whatever. And I think we need to look at that as a governance issue as well. And are there things that we should be doing about supporting those sorts of interrelationship skills as well? Because they're really, really important to our organisations achieving well. So these are issues that over time I have had various discussions about with Michael McGurr. And it is true to say that I was doing this on one occasion and Michael McGurr said to me, Kath, or words to the effect of, Kath, I think you need to stop whinging now and write a book. So here we are. And I have to say that once I sat down to actually write about these things, and I did write about those things, I also got quite excited because it then occurred to me that I also had the opportunity to write the book that I wish I had had when I first became a director of a faith-based not-for-profit, because I think it's often a very confusing time for people when they first come onto a board. So the book is in question and answer format, and the questions are things like, the single question I'm asked most about governance is, what is governance? So there's a chapter on what is governance. There's a chapter on is governance more important than mission? And on, what question should I ask before starting? Why am I feeling confused? Why are those decisions being made? On the basis of what information? I can't actually see why those decisions are being made. Everyone else seems comfortable with it. Am I the only one missing something? And if that's the case, what is it that I can do about that? There is a chapter on what if I can't stand another board member? Now, there are perhaps some people here tonight who have been on boards with me, and clearly that doesn't relate to any of you. And in fact, I've never had any difficulties at all with people that I've been on boards with, but I'm told that that sometimes happens. So there's a chapter about what to do if that does happen to you. And one of the great mysteries, if you are new to a faith-based not-for-profit, what on earth is an MPJP? So, clearly I'm not going to answer that question now because you need to buy the book. So really all of that is how the book came into being, and I had a great time putting it together. And I just do want to take a little moment to say some thank yous because it's been quite the journey for me. Can I just say huge, very genuine thanks to Garrett Publishing, to David and Karen for taking me on board in the first place, for Karen and Juliet for guiding me through, Charmaine and Sandy, honestly, the whole group, it was such an easy and smooth process, unbelievably, and so I am so appreciative and thank you. I do have to say, Michael, thank you as well again, because truly the book wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you, and I so appreciate your wisdom and your ongoing enthusiasm throughout the process, and I'm also very, very appreciative of your ongoing friendship. I do want to just quickly say thank you to some people who really contributed a lot, and they are Virginia Burke, Bishop Shane McKinlay and Karen Donnellon, who all read early copies and provided really fantastic feedback. I also want to say a big thanks to Sister Bridget Arthur, to Lisa Dwyer, to Sister Sally Bradley, Travis Bowman, Sister Mary Louise Petro. I think I've got everyone there. I'd hate to leave everyone out, but I think I'm okay. All of those people managed to read a late copy of the book and provide me with comments about it. And all of them are incredibly busy people. So huge effort and thank you. And I have to say a little thank you to my husband, Tony, as well, because he too was incredibly supportive throughout the process, but he too provided feedback to me along the way. And I have to say, his feedback was not always met with the same enthusiasm from me that everyone else's feedback was. So thank you, Tony, for surviving that. And last but not least, thank you to all of you for giving up a midweek cold winter's evening to be here listening to this. That's wonderful, and thank you.
Thanks so much for your insight into your book, Kathleen. Someone recently suggested you might want to embark on a speaking circuit to talk about your book. I'd like to second that idea if you're up for it. Michael, I'm pretty sure only you could draw a link between processed cheese, donkeys, and Kathleen's book. I don't know how you did it, but as always, I'm in awe of how you can do that sort of thing. I'd just like to quickly mention the design of the book. Kathleen did say that the book is in question and answer format. The chapters are really, some of them are quite short. There's about 34 chapters, and they're bookended by a foreword from Michael McGurr and several reflections and prayers that he's supplied as well. So thank you again, Michael, for that. Kathleen, I'm just wondering, apart from that, the question that you've constantly get asked about what exactly is a board, are there any funny questions in there that you've posed that you think might get a chuckle from the reader?
Oh gosh, and I haven't even got it beside me now. I should have, shouldn't I?
I'm just the one that stands out for me is, do I have to behave like a nun?
Do I have to behave like a nun? Yeah, look, that chapter came about because I had been asked to be in on a panel at girls' high school, and it was a panel of radical women. And I wasn't sure whether or not I qualified, but I was really delighted to be part of it and to be involved. And thank you. The book's just been handed to me. And so, but it really got me thinking about the concept of radicalism and what friends do I have who are radicals? Do I have any radical friends? And bizarrely and absolutely truly, I came to the realisation that my most radical friends are nuns who don't call themselves nuns at all, but they call them, because nuns are cloistered, they call themselves, they are sisters. They're sisters, they live in the real world, and they are awesome. And they have done awesome things their whole time as sisters, and their whole lives have been devoted to service and community, and they live lives of community and prayer and reflection and absolute action, and they do it forever. They live forever and they work forever. And it was absolutely true to say that my most radical friends are sisters. And I know they get very frustrated at times by the sort of reactionary image that you have of nuns in the media sometimes. And so, yeah, I just thought, oh, well, shout out for all the amazing sisters out there.
Absolutely.
May I just
please, Michael,
endorse that? That question, how do nuns behave? Well, sorry, do I have to behave like a nun? Well, how do nuns behave? When I went to the Palm Sunday rally this year, there was a sister there, not young, who I'd known for quite some time, and she went up to the socialist workers stall, who are the extreme left wing of everything, and told them off for printing their newspaper when that was destroying resources. And they looked at her, they were being outmaneuvered to the left by the sister.
There you go. Okay, so perhaps at this point we might open this up to questions. from our attendees. Kathleen, I've got a question. Do you discuss mission and margin in ministry and how we take ministries forward to be sustainable into the future?
I do talk about things, look, in different ways, I suppose the answer is yes. I mean, I look at things like the importance of diversity, and and how mission has changed over time, and how, you know, once upon a time we saw our role really as being that of helper, and of course that you know, our ministries don't see themselves in that way at all now. We work with our partners, with the people that we're serving. We walk with them as partners now and not as helpers. So I guess I talk in broad terms about those kinds of things, the way ministry has changed and the kinds of things that we need to have in place for this to continue to go forward.
Okay. Not any other questions at the moment. Can I just ask you, Kathleen? You've been a board chair of the board. Is it a very different experience than being just a run-of-the-mill board member?
Oh, there are clearly no run-of-the-mill board members, Karen. All board members are very special and very important, and they are, in fact. The difference in being chair is just it is a lot of work being a board chair. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of extra work, and I think one of the common sort of misnomers about being chair is that being chair means that you run the meeting, whereas in fact running the meeting is absolutely the least part of the chair's role. It's all the work that goes on in between meetings that the chair then has to be on top of at each of those meetings. And hopefully, you know, if you've got a great chair, they will be delegating madly to other board members as well. So it's ideally it's a very collaborative process being on a board. But I guess to be chair, you have to be in a position to say, I'm prepared to commit the time, because you're not doing just one project here or one project over there. You're kind of overseeing everything that's going on. And of course, probably the most important part of that is that you're working very closely with the CEO, and you're also the first port of call, hopefully when things go really right, but also when things go really wrong. So yeah, there's a lot of responsibility on the board shoulders, on the chair's shoulders, but in a really collaborative board, you will have lots of support from all of the board members as well.
Okay, so we have a question. How will our clients, in inverted commas, react when there are no longer any religious involved in our ministries?
Yes, that's a really good question, that one, isn't it? Look, I think my own experience has been that that's a process that has been underway for a long time now. And my experience has been with sisters rather than with priests or brothers, I have to say. So I think the sisters are very conscious themselves of that potentially being an issue. I think it has been, in my experience, it's become a little bit less of an issue over time. I think there's an awareness that is happening and has to happen, and there's an understanding and appreciation for the people who are stepping in and taking over those roles for the sisters, and for the brothers and the priests. But it can be delicate, and as with many things, I think we need to be conscious of it. I do tell a story in a book about a time when I was on a board, and I think we made a decision that was, I think, a good decision and the right decision. But what we didn't do was involve the sisters who were impacted by that decision closely enough. We should have reached out to them much more along the way than we did. And I think we all live and learn from those kinds of experiences, and hopefully take that, the next time you do it better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have a question from Vivian. Have you worked with any dioceses?
No, not directly, I haven't. So I suppose I've been involved with a couple of different dioceses, but I haven't worked for any of them, no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jeff asks, Kathleen, have you any comments to make on the connection between governance and synodality as being encouraged by Pope Francis?
Well, yes, I do have a little chapter on synodality. I just really don't like the word. I know that's an aside and it's not the central issue, but it just feels like a really exclusive word for something that's supposed to be about inclusion. But leaving that aside, I guess, look, I haven't been closely involved in that process. I'm supportive of it. I know many people who are very involved in that process and who are absolutely committed in all the right ways from my perspective. And I'm very, I guess I would say I'm hopeful that process can take us somewhere more positive in the church. But having said that, I would also say this, and I'm not the first person to say this, but the reality is that those things that we're looking for, it seems to me, diversity of leadership and so forth, it's actually happening. That is happening in our boards. We need to have greater diversity than we do at the moment, but we're working towards that. We're in a better position than we were a little while back. So I guess I feel as though in some ways it's our ministries that are actually walking the walk. And I hope that the synodal process, can walk alongside us and bring us all to a better place as well.
Thank you. We have another question. What advice do you have for those in healthcare governance and with the ACT announcement in recent weeks regarding Calvary?
Look, I'm afraid I can't make any specific comments. I'm not directly involved in health, so yeah.
Elizabeth asks, is this book for initial NFP directors? What do you have to say to those who have been directors for decades?
So yes, it's certainly for new directors. And I guess I would say that these are my reflections from my experience in my time as a director and in my time as a board chair. So in that sense, I would hope that perhaps more experienced directors might pick up perhaps new perspectives on things that they're already very familiar with. I find myself in whatever area I'm involved with, I'm always keen to look at new and different perspectives from the ones that I'm most familiar with. So I would hope that this might be just that for other people as well, for the more experienced directors.
Another question from Genevieve was, has your view on governance changed since writing this book?
Has my view on governance changed? I don't think that it has changed. I guess perhaps I would say it's maybe it's clarified my thinking. Going through the process probably, well, almost certainly clarified my thinking a bit more. It was my concerns about the way governance sometimes happened that led me into writing it really in the first place. And I suppose the process of actually sitting down and putting it on paper, probably clarified more clearly what those concerns were, and perhaps what we might be able to do about them, or to at least have the conversations about what we might be able to do about them.
Lisa has asked, how do we encourage younger people to think about contributing to boards?
Oh, yes. Oh, look, that is a really great question. I love it. And I have in the boards that I've been on, I've always tried to get young people onto the board, and it can be difficult, and it may not be, it's a hot spot. I love this question.
We opened up a can of worms there, Kathleen.
I think, look, it is hard to do. I think, look, for instance, I was on a school board where we got a recent graduate to come onto the board. because they have a perspective that really no one else on that board, including the principal, is going to have, just because they've only just been through it. And I think that's really valuable. It's not always going to be possible to give a board spot to a young person unless you're in a situation where that young person has skill and experience that's directly relevant. And I think I would argue that a recent graduate on a school board is exactly that. So I think that's a really appropriate voice to have on a school board. On other boards, it might not always be quite so obvious, but and also, of course, it's a huge time and responsibility commitment for any student coming on. But there are other ways to involve them, perhaps getting them involved in a, one of the subcommittees, for instance. Not all the subcommittees are really dull and boring. There are some really good ones as well that oversee the programs that various ministries run. I think that can be a really good way of getting young people involved. And yeah, I'm also very open to any ideas about encouraging young people to come onto boards. And I think it's a win-win. And I think also, as boards, it's, I think we maybe have a bit of responsibility. It's or at least an opportunity to mentor, young leadership as well. So it's a learning experience for them, a mentoring opportunity for us, and I think really worthwhile.
Okie doke. You might just, we've got a few more questions and then we might need to wrap this up. So, from Karen, what does it mean to take this role in the church and often be hampered by authority that is not as evolved? Hints on managing.
Oh, look, I guess, look, in all seriousness, I would say that I genuinely take comfort, but inspiration also from two women who are responsible for two of the congregations that I have done lots of work with. And those two women are Catherine McCauley and Nano Nagel. And they are both women, and there are so many others throughout history that have the same tale about frustration and bitter disappointment at times that they felt within the church themselves from decisions that were made that they had to endure. But they just picked up and kept going and kept going and kept going. And I see that in religious in all walks as well. Now, we all see those women and men who are out there at the coalface, walking alongside the marginalised, at protests in support of asylum seekers and refugees. And while I appreciate the point of the question, absolutely, and I do at times absolutely feel that frustration myself, I do, I guess, take comfort in the grassroots of the work that we do and just keeping going with getting that work done, because I think that is the real, that is living the Gospels, actually.
Claire asks, what advice do you have when one changes from an advisory board to a governance board? How do you educate the CEO in the role?
Okay, how do you educate this? Well, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Well, I have an obvious answer to that one. Buy my book. There are...
all will be revealed.
Yeah, it is a big change, and it's really, really important when if that's what happens, if you effectively have a board that changes from being advisory to being an incorporated board, that those directors understand the responsibilities that they're taking on board, which they simply didn't have as advisory board members. And so I would definitely say there needs to be workshopping there around what those responsibilities are. Probably for the whole, well, certainly for leadership and all of the board of that organisation. Yeah, big change, important question.
And I think we might just have one last question from Jeff. In many organisations, people at the top make the key decisions often without consulting other members. Any comment?
I'm sorry, I just missed the start of that, Karen.
That's okay. In many organisations, people at the top make the key decisions, often without consulting other members. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, look, I guess all I can say really is that I think, you know, ideally we want our organisations to be collaborative. I work with a very collaborative model myself. It's my preference. Having said that, though, at the end of the day, someone has to actually make the decisions, and sometimes there will be decisions that are made that not everyone is happy with, and sometimes that's the way it has to be. But in an ideal world, decisions aren't imposed that are unpopular, but I think it's at least important that people feel as though they've had a genuine voice, not just a token voice, but a genuine voice when there's major change coming. But yeah, at the end of the day, someone actually does have to make the decisions.
Okay, I think we'll stop the questions there. But lots of questions, and there are lots of answers in your book, Kathleen. So, you know, I think everyone tonight really should grab a copy of the book and find out how exciting you've made governance read.
Well, my sister told me it was a page turner, so there we are.
It is a page turner. Look, what I do like about this book, just as an aside, is that we can read it from beginning to end, or we can just, you know, drop into the questions that we're focused on. So it's just really, really clear, really well written, and very easy even for people like me who know nothing about governance. So, okay, so as this evening comes to a close, can I just ask everyone to share this timely book with work colleagues, family, friends, spread the message far and wide, and buy a copy or 2 or 10. I think every board member of a faith-based or not-for-profit organisation, anyone thinking of joining a board in this space, will truly benefit from reading this book. And for those of you who have purchased the book already, thank you so much for supporting Kathleen's work. With that, our evening comes to an end. Look for the video link in your email inboxes next week. Feel free to share with your friends, families, and colleagues. The reminder emails we've sent you has a link to purchase. So we've made it really easy as possible to buy as many books as you wish. Just be aware that the special launch price finishes at the end of May, so you need to get your skates on. So thanks again, Michael and Kathleen, for a lovely evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and supporting Garrett Publishing, and we hope you have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.